when I failed at marriage, all of that identity that I had created got questioned. And I'm so thankful for it
Mhm.
because it started leading to such a deeper route. So that is when I, for my own personal reasons, went and got EMDR, which is great at, so it's called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. When we describe the mechanism of it, it doesn't make sense why it works. So I'll stick with what it does, which is just really helps change how we store things in our brain.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you guys listen to my guest, Deanne Dietz, who I'm so excited about. Deanne and I crossed paths because we actually had a session together. And the gift that I have is to be able to actually have a conversation with people and get to know them a little bit deeper than what we normally do just on a surface conversation. And Deanne and I started talking about more or less what she does as her profession. But the thing that really got my attention is the understanding and healing our emotional baggage. And, through this journey of transforming into this fifth dimensional energy, we are all struggling a lot with past emotions, past trauma, old belief systems. And I think everybody has heard enough. I know that I've said it every time you hear me talk, I'm talking about letting go of our past. And so I realized that the main reason why I wanted to do these podcasts was to help people find resources to touch in or find out more about different modalities and different forms of healing than just the traditional methods of maybe just regular psychology or therapy. And so after talking to Deanne, she has a plethora of little tricks that she uses to assist people in their healing. And so this is why she's here. So, Deanna, welcome. And
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
yeah, well, I'm really excited to have you here and share your information. So, now that I've kind of given my long spiel, would you mind telling people a little bit about your history and where it's led you to where you are today?
Sure. I grew up in what my brother and I used to characterize as "mommy dearest," and it looked perfect from the outside, and we were high achieving kids. But I was really terrified as a kid, and I was super sensitive. I didn't know that. It's really in hindsight that I recognize how attuned I was to everybody around me and what they were feeling, which created this urgency to make sure everybody else was okay, and just got in that habit, right? Created those patterns and really got good at soothing other people,
Mm.
which made me a great friend, and at first made me a good school counselor. I went into elementary school counseling to save the children. I knew
Mhm.
something was off, but still pretty unconscious. So as a school counselor, I started my own healing journey, and years of talk therapy, and then getting into Reiki or restorative touch. I was really searching, and again, I had all these right answers. I even became an enlightenment master, or I sundanced and earned the rights to pour sweat lodge, and I felt like I was engaging all these things that were supposed to bring me peace, or help me live a good life and be a good person. But I still did the old behaviors. Like, they were so persistent. And so I had to dig deeper. I had to fall on my face, and then go through, the next phase of, what more is there?
So, when you were talking about the old behaviors, can you give some examples of that?
Sure. Like being perfect, for example, that worked really well in my family. If we got great grades and, had the chores done, or were kind kids or spoke well. And so I carried that into my adulthood. And I remember within about 10 years of getting my degree, I had a 3-ring binder of certificates that I had earned to make me even better. Really,
Yeah.
I was looking for self-worth, but
Yeah. Yeah.
or people pleasing. If I could make sure everybody was happy with me, then maybe I was good enough.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a common thing that, that we do as human beings. We're always, we're ingrained, from day one of being programmed to satisfy somebody else's desires of who we should be, how we should act. And again, depending on the adult figure in our lives, how they condition us, you know, it kind of affects us throughout our lifetime. Like what you mentioned, if somebody was saying that you're not good enough, then you kind of have that, okay, well, if I can't do this right, then how do I need to do it? What can I do to satisfy you? And again, so many people have that tendency to be the people pleaser because it makes us feel like, well, then we're worthy if we make them happy, and totally neglecting who we are. And I want to kind of segue into saying that because we are going to talk about how these blockages and how these belief systems create the number one, it creates identities of who we think we are. And then by staying in that mind space, we have a tendency to be our false selves. We're not the true selves of who we really are. And what I'm going to lead into, where we're going to at the end of this conversation, is talking about our spiritual nature and becoming more intuitive and beginning to recognize how these belief systems and staying in our head block that ability to be able to listen better and be more connected. So we didn't really talk about what you do for your profession. Can you share
Yeah,
that?
the school counseling was wonderful. I love children. I love to be with them, but it always felt like there was something more. But I also had my own work to do, because by being in that pleasing mode, I was so disconnected from myself. And from the outside, people would come to me. I was called the boundaries queen with my staff. They would come to me like, how do I handle this situation? Or I was considered an elder in a spiritual community, and people came to me, or I held workshops. And the beauty of having all that crash down, meaning when I failed at a marriage, is I got to look at myself and say, this all these outside things aren't working. And I didn't even recognize the word intuition back then, but it was, I felt like I was so full of all these strategies and techniques and these things that did help people, and they brought me along a certain way, but there was something missing. Like I wasn't being my authentic self. I had no sense of
Mhm.
purpose. It was purpose from my thinking mind, like
Okay.
I'm here to help people, or I'm a leader, or I'm a facilitator, or whatever. But when I failed at marriage, all of that identity that I had created got questioned, and I'm so thankful for it.
Mhm.
Because it started leading to such a deeper route. So that is when I, for my own personal reasons, went and got EMDR, which is great at, so it's called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. When we describe the mechanism of it, it doesn't make sense why it works. So I'll stick with what it does, which is just really helps change how we store things in our brain. So if, say, at 5 years old, I stored, if I'm quiet, then things go better for me. People approve of me. Or at 10, if I am a high achiever, then, I get accolades. I'm good enough. So we store these things unconsciously, and we just keep living them out. And that's what I did through my marriage. Like, okay, if I'm this certain way, then all will be good. But when that didn't work, I got to look at, how can I be 100% responsible for my side of things? And instead of looking at that situation or what that person did or didn't do. It was, how was I coming about it, and how can I shift like my whole mindset? And so EMDR was the starting place of that. How do I
Mhm.
let go of those old beliefs when I didn't even know what they were?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a common story. You know, we have these patterns, then we start beginning to recognize these patterns, but we don't really know what they are, where they started from, or how to resolve them. And so failed marriages, failed relationships, these things that we look at as why me? Why can't I make these things work? When really on some crazy spiritual level, they're just it's it's basically the teaching ground is the word that I'm hearing to say. You know, it's basically what is opening the doors for us to learn more about ourselves, and learn more about how these things were created, and then be able to deprogram some of the things that have been so embedded. So you help people do what for a living? What do you do?
Okay,
What
sure.
is your job? What do you
So
call yourself?
sure. So I'm a trauma therapist and an intuitive relationship coach. So
Okay.
I finally get to the place where it's not just follow the technique, but it's feeling into the person and feeling the room and just being guided, asking for help from my guides and their guides. And, what is it that they need at this moment to really shift those beliefs? And in a sense, I still save the children, because for all of us, I think of our brain as like a snowman, and that the base of the brain is the fight, flight, freeze. But
Mhm.
in that belly of the snowman is like all the children, right? So that 5 and 10-year-old I was speaking of, all the parts of self that we've come up with these ideas and ways of being. And so it's like taking one child at a time and mentoring it. And that's where the intuition comes in, because standard EMDR is more for the mental, like changing the thoughts. But when we can really sit with that child and nurture them and address their fears and observe them to the point that I think of it as if you brought a foster child into your home, like they're not going to trust you right away. And just because you say it's different, they're not going to act different. They don't know how. And the missing piece is really the working with the spirit world. So I did standard EMDR, and I still felt like there was something more. And so going out into nature has been a big teacher. So for example, being having tenacity, that's something I pride myself on. Or back then it was like, I am strong, I don't need anybody, I can handle everything myself. And one time I was crossing a river, and I started to sink, and not being very embodied or intuitive or in the moment, using all my senses, I just kept pushing through. Except the river I was crossing had been part of Mount St. Helens when it blew, and it was like quicksand. It was just this powdery ash. And
Oh.
so I was sinking, and first I was down to my thighs, and when I started pushing more, I was down to my waist. And it wasn't until I thought, get on my belly, and I kind of slithered across. By the time I got to land and turned around, it had already all filled in. There was no sign of distress, right? But that's an example of how my thinking mind, for my survival, one of the belly of the snowman kids was like, just be strong and fight, and show up and push harder. It didn't serve me so much, but nature was my teacher in that moment.
Hmm. So okay, so that's a great explanation. So when you were talking about your journey and your history, all of the experiences that you've had from the child up to that particular point, what, how has your journey led you to how has it led you? I can't even say the words. How did it lead you? Is what I'm trying to say. Sorry, my words. How did it lead you to the point of your spiritual connection? That connection to the divine, or the spirit realm, because I know that this was a process for you, and you had to go through these certain things to get to where you are today. And think there's some steps in here. So can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. always been through struggle that it leads me here, but I end up in nature. So as a kid, we lived up against some woods, and again, not conscious, but my friends were in the woods, and I used to go out to the woods and I would call them. And back then we called them Indians, but it was. It's in Connecticut, so it was where there were Indian lands, and I would go out there and I would feel presence. I would feel friendly presence, and I didn't have communication with them. I didn't see them, or there wasn't anything more, but there was something safe about the woods.
Mm.
And so in my 20s, when there was lots of turmoil, I had moved to Washington, which is this bountiful woods, and I would start to go camping. And my goal was always to, as an introvert, go out in the woods and not see another soul. But it was what I really realized what I was trying to do is get rid of the noise so that I could hear and start to feel and get to know all of my senses and how I speak to myself or how spirit comes through. And so it was in those quiet times that more lessons came, whether it was something a tree said, for example, like, come, I'll hold you, and going into a tree and then feeling that quiet, but then also feeling the sun come down, and these always come as surprises. Like anytime I've tried to do these things, like I've taken all sorts of classes, and whenever I try, it doesn't work. But when it spontaneously comes, so being in the tree and then feeling the sun, and it's like, oh, this is for me. Like, oh, you don't mind this? Like, I'm not being a bother. I am worthwhile. And so it started to rebuild me, but connecting more to spirit. And then just spontaneously some other things happening, like trying to um, understand my grief, and then just having a spirit show up and being devoured. Like at first, that's kind of scary. It happened once with a serpent during a Reiki session, but another time, this angelic looking, she's blonde and crystalline eyes, and then just devoured me, but then spit me out the other end. And I was like, oh, I feel cleaner. Like this feels good. And then I
Yeah.
reassembled, and so feeling gifts like spontaneously. Another time from Mount Rainier, I was actually driving for this one, but I was driving up a hill and the view of Mount Rainier came, but all of a sudden I felt like that energy was in my body and it was rewiring me. And I didn't think I had bad circuitry or whatever, but I just felt like all my circuitry was getting cleaned up. So I think it was from this place of surrender and struggle, and then seeking solace out in nature, that these things started to happen. But I felt loved and I felt cared for in a
Yeah.
way that I didn't know from people.
Well, and what a beautiful way. It's, and the messages that I receive are constantly talking about just being, just being. And when we can get quiet in the woods, like you said, the thing about the woods is that there's no human thoughts. It's not the chaos. It's not, did you do this to me or I did this to you or you did it's not any of that. It's there and you can smell and you can breathe and you can hear the birds, you can feel the footsteps, you can feel the leaves falling and hear them. And being able to be present is the most significant gift that we can have to awaken our senses. And so it's something that you can't go into. Like you said, you made me laugh a little bit to myself. Okay, I'm going to go hug a tree. And you're like, okay, do I feel anything yet? Yeah. And so immediately you're right back in your head. And so by being able to be one, be in that moment, it tears down all of that so that you really can take in what the trees have to give, what the earth has to give. So I think that nature is the most significant gift that we can absorb. So
It began to teach me, okay, if I'm not supposed to do that, then what do I do? And one time my grandmother came, and this time she had amethyst eyes, but she spoke to me as she did when she was alive, which was she's kind of abrupt, but she was like, Deanne, you're taking yourself out of the river. Like you are the river. And every time, and she was showing me it was within my marriage that I was doing it, but you come out of your flow and I wasn't a fish, but it kind of had that feeling of you come out of being the river and you come on the side and then you start to talk to this person and try to negotiate who you are while you wither and dry up. And so
Mm,
it was like, no, be the flow. And at the time I didn't know like what does it mean to be yourself or how do I feel that in my body? But the river started to teach me like when I am in that flow, when I'm in that alignment, like there's a piece to it, even, and there's movement, but it's my movement. It's
yeah.
not, oh, it's over there, or I'm not stopping and discussing with the boulder like, why are you in my way? I just go around it. I'm just
Yeah.
being me.
Well, what a great, that's a beautiful explanation. Thanks, Grandma.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, a fish out of water too. What's it going to do but struggle?
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's a great explanation. So you did mention that you were the boundary queen.
I was trying to learn. Yes, like I knew how to do it for everybody else. I knew what the right answers were.
Uh-huh.
But I was still a doormat in my own life, and
Yeah.
so that embodiment, there's such a missing piece, and that's where EMDR was one step, but there was something more, and this is where the spirit world comes in. It's about having this surrogate family in a sense, being treated with the love and kindness and being held, being shown in the experiences, like being in the tree and having peace, or like, how do I have the flow? Um, that then I start to know how to be this, all these different pieces. I now call my web of light. And so I actually had found somebody on Instagram who did these beautiful drawings or artwork, and had them make me one of like, who are all my, all the animals or elements of nature or the spirits that had come and that I feel like I'm surrounded by now. That makes such a difference of not being alone, and just
Mhm.
helped live all those teachings. And so with all of my clients now, we start with a web of light, like what are their resources, and so that we, like, our nervous system is more soothed and we start to have a safe place to go. Otherwise we can't review all this trauma and say, well, quit doing all your old coping skills but not have anything new.
Mhm. Yeah. So when we're talking about, because boundaries are such a big thing, and, in kind of talking about being an empath and taking on, because, you had mentioned taking on other people's stuff, trying to save the children.
Mhm.
And so there's so many of us, the spiritual people that are naturally empaths, and we have a tendency to absorb everybody else's stuff, and then we don't know how to handle it ourselves, and we can't differentiate between what is theirs and what is mine. And
Mhm.
so, can you give some advice on how to separate and how to be able to stay in our own boundaries without taking on other people's stuff?
Yeah, it's really become a body feel for me. I do now ask myself, like, okay, if this was my friend, so that I could get up to the head of the snowman, like have better perspective. If this was my friend and they were in this situation, what would I advise to them? Would I be
Yeah.
saying, sure, wake up in the middle of the night and answer that call, or sure, work late again, or would I be saying, you deserve to have balance? So that's one way that I check with myself, but it's really the more that I can focus on staying in that flow or that alignment. So that might be making sure that when I wake up, that I'm connecting to the universe. I feel like I wake up and instead of having a dog right there, how they're always so happy to see you in the morning, that there's just some feeling of like, oh, there you guys are, you're still here. Like, thank you. So I feel greeted in the morning, and having that gratitude and connection, and so can I maintain that connection and be present to this person? But if I'm so absorbed in this person, then I'm likely giving all my energy away. I'm not just, holding space for them and being present.
Mhm.
And own oxygen mask on first. I'm so thankful that I've had periods of time when I gave so much that I either felt burnout or like I just felt so depleted I couldn't give anything more. And both in my marriage and with some friendships. Like I just got to the point where I'm like, I'm so done. I never want to see this person again. And I can have love for them now to say, thank you for teaching me. It has nothing to do with what their expectations were. It
Hmm.
was what I was buying into and how I got absorbed in. So one, the EMDR helps to take away that programming of, I'm not enough, because that's part of the, well, I must need to help you. But really it's about staying connected to that flow and being filled by the universe. Like that's how I can be the best service to anybody. And if I'm overextending, then I'm just teaching them, oh, you have to give, give, give. And that's what your worth is. So I
Yeah.
try to hold myself accountable in that way.
Yeah. And what I found is that, from my own personal experience, because I'm horrible, I'm better now, but I used to be horrible about taking on everybody else's stuff. And I constantly have people that are worried about other people. I'm worried about my children. I'm worried about my friends. I'm worried about, and being able to understand how these things, which either can be empathy or else it's just our mind telling us, that we're supposed to be so concerned about these people that they consume us. And being able to recognize when I'm sacrificing myself for somebody else. And we are so used to feeling this way that sometimes we don't know that there's another way. It's like this is the only way that I know. I'm not supposed to feel like this. So do you have some signs that that people can use to recognize when they're not standing in their own power but absorbing other people's stuff?
I think it's a body read. Like if I feel like I am like a radio tower and I can broadcast out. So I'm saying it right now as music, but maybe it's felt as, can I bring light in my body and radiate it out? Can I bring in a stream and be sprinkling out in all directions? So if
Mhm.
if I can't feel that flow, then I don't really have presence. I'm not being a beacon of light or support for people, because the other body sensation is kind of that leaning forward, like doing too, trying to administer, or change others.
Yeah,
And so if I get that body sensation, that's always a setup for failure.
yeah,
So it's more, is the presence the gift?
yeah. Well, and I think you just touched on something that's really important, needing to be heard. When you start saying, and this is how you should do that. And they're not listening to me and they should do what I say. And that notorious thing, the hard job of being a parent,
Yeah, I'm
is,
just trying to help. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And so that's a big part of who we are that we have to unravel. And it's kind of difficult to let go of that control, which it is a form of control with, we're being controlled and then we're trying to control others all in the same thing. And so that's something that I think that we should all kind of look at and recognize that
The
maybe
work
some
with this,
EMDR.
yes, to clear out those negative beliefs. Yes. And the work with the spirits helps really fill us in, like, we're already enough. And I think our society reinforces that,
Yeah.
you're a good parent or you're a caring parent when you are worried about others. But what
Mhm.
message is that sending to that other person? I think you're so incapable, I need to worry about you, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
yeah, I can't
Yeah.
trust you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a big part of the way that we've been conditioned, to believe. And, part of the shift from the 3D to the 5D, again, we talk about letting go of those old belief systems and those old patterns. This is a perfect example of what's fading away and allowing us to exist without that mind control. Yeah. So you had talked about, you're talking about the spirits and the guides that kind of help you. So do you have any way that you can share how you became more in tune with your guides? Because I do want to preface this is that we all have guides. And the trick is learning how to listen. And so tell us your story.
For me, it was In my late 20s, my mother died suddenly. And at first, it was because I wanted to make contact. I wanted to figure out how to speak to the other side. What I got was a roadblock in a sense because she was busy. She was being processed, which was great because then it allowed me to um, meet others in a sense. So I learned how to journey. So I started studying shamanism, and that's just some of that nature based. I was in a vibrational health program. So once a month there was a different focus, and that weekend that was the shamanic focus. Like I just came alive. I knew there was something there for me. And so I learned how to journey and actually ended up journeying every night for about 2 years. And so a very kind of a structured way, going to the lower world, asking the animal spirits for guidance about certain things. And at first, it was definitely, I was asking, like, well, how do I get this person to whatever? Or, what should I do about? So it was kind of more ego driven or based on those beliefs that I had. And it would kind of fall flat. But I started noticing that when I just asked for comfort or please help me understand, please help me grow in this, I often, it doesn't mean I got the answer, but I definitely got support and presence from them. So learning how to journey to the lower world, and then later journeying to the upper world where there was different kinds of spirits for me, the upper world are usually more like healing, like repair, whether it's physical or emotional, or even, removing things from my brain. But it's always done with such love and never judgment, like, oh, you've taught me all these things, I'm a year into this, but I just got spun up in an ego conflict with somebody, can you help me? And they're always right there.
Yeah.
So for me, that was kind of my entryway into it.
Mhm. So some people may not know what journeying is.
uh
So can you kind of give a little description?
sure.
Because there's lots of ways to journey. So maybe just
Okay.
talk about yours.
Yeah. So it can feel similar to meditation in that we just get ourselves quiet and we're just present. And then it's the difference is really setting an intention. So setting an intention to go to another reality in a sense, through a threshold. So for lower world, it's finding a cave or a tree and then going down into the roots with the intention of not staying on the earth, not going into the earth, but going into that spiritual lower realm. So very much having a, for my greater good, I am here to grow. I only want to invite things that are of the highest good. And I'm inviting a helper spirit. Like I would like to meet, and at the first level is a power animal. I would like a, not power in like dominating, but energy, right?
Right.
And the first animal that I met was a jaguar that when when I asked, like, what can you teach me, or how can you help me, she jumped in my body, and then I felt more of the how like just walking with power, walking very solid and confident, but walking softly. And then in interacting with cubs, like, 1 minute being able to be very playful, but the next minute being able to be like, hey, knock that off, which was awesome for my boundaries because at the time I wasn't comfortable setting boundaries and I would ruminate about things. But the jaguar just, sets the boundary, stop that, and then goes right back to playing or goes back to stalking the prey. So
Mhm.
um, it was an embodied way of learning, um, what's there and what's available, and so in that I felt loved and guided, and there would be various adventures that, depending on what my need was.
Yeah. And of course, it changes every time. And it's not like one journey isn't going to do it. You said that you had
Oh,
journeyed every
sure. Yeah.
day for, yeah. Yeah. But I think it's an important tool that people can use. And that's why I wanted to discuss it and bring it up. And not only that, it also opens up your intuition. So can you share how it helps your intuition?
Sure. Yeah. When I'm going to the lower world, if I'm in my head, if I'm trying to direct and understand, if I'm in problem solving mode, thinking mind mode, then it's very frustrating because either nothing happens or there's some symbology I don't understand. And then I try to apply meaning to it, and that doesn't fit because it's so limited by my thinking mind. The opposite of that is being able to just sitting and feeling and sensing. And so I might be down there and let's say I see a bear, and my thinking mind might say, well, the animal Bible says, a bear means this. But if I
Yeah.
can just be sensing and feeling, then there's this body feel that comes like, oh, I'm feeling the bear's playfulness, or I'm feeling like, oh, the invitation that I get to be one of the cubs. I get to be watched over, and I get to just play. Like, even though I'm different than them, like, I'm accepted. And so it was based on what was being felt within was the interpretation. So intuitively, I would know where to go.
Yeah. And so it was kind of helping you to be quiet again, get out of the head, stay
Yeah.
present. Yeah. And be in tune with your body.
Yeah.
So, so you had the privilege of going on these journeys and helping to be able to see things differently. So how did it help you mentally and emotionally process through?
Sure. I guess in a couple ways, I think of it as like a thousand-piece puzzle, that every time I had one of those interactions, it's not like I was thinking consciously, like, okay, Deanne, here's some more evidence that you're okay as you are, or you're acceptable. But I felt it. And so,
Mm.
in a way, they were my surrogate parents. They were, all those things that we deserve as children, oh, you're a goofball, you're so funny, or, oh, you're so smart. How'd you figure that out? It's that reassurance and love and kindness, and particularly when I feel stupid, or I'm really hard on myself. Here I am with this degree and notebook full of certificates, and I still failed at a marriage. And so going to them and feeling like seeing and feeling myself the way they saw and felt me, um, it just soothed, and it was proof, right? Instead of, I have beautiful friends, and some that I've been friends with for over 20 years, and there's still that thought of, but they are human, or
Yeah.
something might get in the way, or we both have egos, or whatever the thing is, but the spirits are consistent and
Yeah.
consistently loving, and it's just easier to trust them.
Yeah.
And that's why I like bringing them into the work I do with clients, that people who have trauma, most of them, humans aren't the trustworthy ones.
Mhm.
So when we can bring in light, or a plant, or a tree, or an animal, or even like a grandma feeling angel, angelic, but it's a grandma kind of feel to it, then it's more trustworthy, and it begins to help them embody that feeling of like, it's safe now.
Yeah. So, okay, so because you got my curiosity up. Okay, so when you're having a session with somebody and you talk about bringing these spirit guides, I call them spirit guides, forward so that if I'm the client, I can feel more comfortable with my guides. So what's the process that you use in order to help somebody become more comfortable with being able to have this experience and trust it and feel into it? What's your
Sure.
process for that?
It's really meet people where they are. And so it may be as simple as, hey, do you know Maria from The Sound of Music? Could you imagine being one of those kids? So, for some people, there's no connection to this other realm. They at least they don't know yet.
Yeah.
And so starting there, or an imaginary figure, or have you had an animal before, that can you put yourself in their shoes and feel yourself? So just starting to play with it. Other clients walk in, and I might say, are you aware of who it is that stands behind you, or who's the one that just walked in, who has this kind of energy to them? And I wouldn't have done that 10, 15 years ago, and now I'm pretty just, this is what you get when you're in my office.
Yeah.
So it's about meeting them where they are, and then could you consider the possibility of how they see you, or or can you ask to go to that place, if it exists? We don't even have to prove that it's there, but can we just say, you know what, if there is something, can you help me feel it in my heart?
Mhm.
Or muscle testing, can I hold this out, and if there is anybody who helps me, can you make the hand heavier that's supposed to be my yes? And just playing with wherever they are, but really little pieces.
Yeah. So talk about muscle testing. So explain what that is in a short, brief version.
Yeah. So I'm no expert. I really am not good at doing it myself with fingers. But so, for example, standing up straight as if you have a string at the top of your head, and just trying not to think about it, but asking yourself some yes, no questions. Do I have jeans on today? Or, do I like French fries? And just feeling which way the body will lean. And so getting to know what's a yes and what's a no in your own body. For me, I tend to fall forward for the yes and back for the no. I was just out doing part of the Wonderland Trail the other day, and I was so tired, and it was a long day after a 4-hour hill climb. But there was this side trip, and I'm like, is it in my best interest to go? And I felt the lean, and so I went. And
Yeah.
so the other is, in the hands, and for some people the heavy one is the no. For me the heavier is the yes. Or which one will glow, which one comes brighter or closer. And so to me that's intuition too, right? Of
Yeah.
like sensing, yeah, what's the answer for this individual at this time.
Yeah. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because muscle testing is a fabulous tool. And, and I talked about this in a previous podcast with somebody else. And so I'm reiterating since you brought it up organically. Because, there's a lot of research. We're just talking about it very basically.
Yeah.
But, I always talk about how amazing our bodies are. Every answer that we need, our body can tell us, our guides can tell us. There's so many things around us that can take us down our path with grace and ease if we understand how to read the signals.
Yeah.
And again, so muscle testing is just one of those tools that we have that our body's speaking to us. And our
When
bodies, go ahead.
just when trauma happens, it's so hard to be in the body. We work so hard to be out, whether that's, what does this person need, or dissociating, or staying busy, or numbing in the various ways, chemically. And so, when I heard about all these tools in my 20s, it was so frustrating to have people say, oh, I just ask, or I always felt like such a failure. And so for anybody who is in that place of, I just get nothing, when I try to do that,
Yeah.
it's, can it be the most minuscule, which way am I going to drive home today? Or food, do I feel like eggs or sausage right now? And just trying it with the small stuff. And I find that when I listened for things that
Yeah.
didn't have risk to them, then I started to trust,
Yeah.
because it was so spot on.
Yeah.
And in my practice, like I noticed when people make big decisions from intuition, they
Mhm.
don't have regrets. Like I can say in 25 years, so nobody has come back and said, I quit this job, or I, sold this house, or I did this thing from intuition and I regret it.
Yeah.
It's always when it was, well, my thinking mind said this was the right thing to do for all these reasons. Oh, but now I know this other stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, and that's important what you're saying because trust is the biggest our biggest obstacle.
sure.
We can hear all day long. You can have the knot in your stomach. You can feel the push that's taking you somewhere. You can feel all of that nudge. You can feel that, hear that inner voice. You can have all the signs, but our head's running the show. And to surrender, I keep this word keeps coming up. It's this thing that's happening now. We're surrendering and learning how to trust that voice. And it's so scary to let go of the mind's control and jump into something that I'm just feeling this. I don't have any data to back up my decision.
Yes.
And so by being able to take those little examples, of what I used to do, like when I was doing massage therapy and I learned how to do massage intuitively and I would start feeling changes. I had a client that I could ask, do you feel that? Is that sore? Is that, you could get feedback. But in our decisions, we don't necessarily have anybody to confirm what we're feeling. So by learning to do those little things, the muscle testing, like you said, bacon or eggs today. Am I wearing jeans or yes or no? Let me test you out here. And so these things that we can test and play with in order to build up our confidence is a huge step to becoming more intuitive and learning to live in that nature. So yay for muscle testing. I love
Give
muscle
ourselves
testing.
grace along the way. One of the
Mhm.
gifts I got from Grandmother Moon, it felt like the energy of the moon felt like this old lady who used to ride a Harley and, just got in all sorts of trouble and made lots of mistakes, can now look upon us like, oh yeah, you youngins, you're just going to do that stuff.
Yeah.
And to have that grace of, even if we get the intuition and we do the thing anyway, that to love ourselves like Grandmother Moon showed me. And I feel like I then passed that on to my clients. And even just this week was thinking to myself, like, I'm going to love and support this person no matter how long they stay in this relationship, that they've gotten all sorts of signs and nudges and now intuitions. But
Yeah.
just that we all have to go down that road, make as many mistakes as we need to before then we go, oh, that intuition's been right over
Yeah.
and over. Maybe I'll start listening quicker
Well, you
until
know
it
what
feels
is,
safe.
yeah, that silly saying is that, well, if you don't do it the first time, it'll keep coming back until you do. The
Yep.
universe does work that way. Okay, you didn't listen to me this time, let's try it again.
Yeah.
You didn't
Yeah.
listen to me this time, let's try it again.
Yeah.
But, I wanted to go back to the love that you feel, when you're in that place of your journey and you can feel the love. One of the things that I think is so important for people to understand is that, they look at their lives and they look at so many things as failures when they can't see it from that spiritual perspective. And this beautiful gift that I have people ask me all the time, what is my purpose and what should I have done differently? And, these normal life questions. And never one time has their guides ever said that they did anything wrong. And they are always in the place of love, always. The universe loves us. We are perfection. Regardless of what you say about me or they say about me or of what I say about myself, I'm perfect regardless of what I do. And we beat ourselves up in that way of not seeing that beautiful unconditional love that is constantly within us and surrounds us. And so I really think that it's important that everybody understand that your guides are surrounding you constantly and they are nothing but the purest form of love and they love you unconditionally. And so there's my spiel.
And it's, with that love that I can look back and say, like, then it's a gift that I felt depleted, or it's a gift that I felt worthless. It's a gift that, I was in these tough situations because it has helped come alive within me, the passion I have about helping people. Like I think of, I grew up in hell and I figured out how to get out there. And now I know the way out. And now I can go show other people how to get out. And when they feel free, like that makes me feel so alive and privileged to be trusted in that way. And that's why I'm here. And if I didn't know that place, I wouldn't know how to meet them. Like, oh, they're at the crossroads of this and this road. I know right where to find you. I'm there, and I'll
Yeah.
help you get out.
Yeah. Yeah. And what a great gift you have to be able to see that with other people. There's one more thing that I want to talk about that we haven't mentioned yet that you provide is soul retrieval. And I think that people probably have heard of soul retrievals before, but they haven't really understood what they are. I don't think it's really explained that much. Can you, because we're running out of time, can you do like a real short, brief version of what that is and how that can help people?
Sure. It very much overlaps with in trauma. We often dissociate. So if you think of a 5-year-old child who something bad is going on and they're powerless, that nervous system is just getting fried and bombarded. And so if we can't act out, like if we can't fight or flight, then maybe we can just shut it all down. And so we vacate. And one of the ways that we do that is, sometimes it's like parts get stuck in the dungeon inside, and maybe that turns into a backache or cancer later in life, but it can also mean like vacate, like just gone.
Yeah.
So the soul parts split off, and they're just there in that time zone. And so let's say 20 years later, with the help of the spirits, that we will go back to that time zone, get that essence of that energy, and bring it back and put it back in that person. And the beauty of the overlap with the trauma therapy is that if you bring that soul part back, but that person is still abandoning themselves by, say, substance use, or the, overly accommodating everybody else, well, then that soul may vacate again. And so we want to be updating the behaviors, and bring in that love and safety into that vessel, so that when the soul part comes back, there's safety for it, so that it can then grow. And I've had many clients say this, and I felt this myself, of at first it'll feel like you have an inner child, like this little vulnerable part that you need to take care of. And maybe that means that's urge to splash in puddles, or I don't know, eat popsicles all day. And so you feel that younger vulnerable self, but over time you feel like it's growing up, and that then it just integrates. So then you feel more yourself, like you feel more whole. So when people say, I found myself, or I'm coming into my own, it's the capturing the energy. And so it's just a beautiful complement to when there's dissociative parts. We do very similar work in trauma therapy, of getting those child parts, but through the help of the spirits, like a foster child, we parent them or teach them that it's now safe, so they can stick around, and
Mm.
what the new strategies are.
Yeah. So how do you do soul retrieval? Is it meditative process, or is it something
In a sense, yeah,
in a sense?
that
Okay.
it's in the same room, and that I will either teach people how to journey, which I love empowering people, to teach them how to journey, teach them how to do soul retrieval themselves, or if it's just going to be one piece of their work, then I'll do it for them, but just kind of really track and sense if that soul part's ready to come back, and have it be one piece of their trauma healing.
Yeah. Well, I wish we weren't out of time. It's like, holy cow, I only have 30 more minutes and it's already, it
Um,
went by just like that.
yeah.
But you just barely got to scratch on, what EMDR is, and what the journeying is, and what soul retrieval is. And those are just three of the modalities that you use, compared to all kinds of stuff that you use. So if people want to get more information and contact you, how do they do that?
Sure. So on my website, hearthealing.org, there's a description of the EMDR intensives, and there'll be some links to YouTube videos that explain it in much more depth, of just all the layers that we address. And then also revive-your-relationship .com for couples that just really want to go deeper, like beyond the communication strategies. Those are all good, but it's really about kind of intuitively feeling like, what are we really playing out here, and
Mhm.
what needs to be healed.
Good, good. Okay, so do you do sessions long distance?
For the couples, yes, anywhere in the US. And then
Okay,
for the intensives, Washington State, either
okay,
online or in person. Yeah.
okay, great. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Again, I wish we had more time.
Yeah.
I want to dig deeper into the soul journey, or the soul retrieval. So we may have to come back and have another conversation about
I
that.
love giving credit to the spirit world. It's such a gift for all
Absolutely.
of us. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Well,
So
thank you.
again, I want to thank you for being here. Thank you so much. And for everybody else, thank you for being here, and I hope to see you the next time.